On the golf courses, he was synonymous with precision and respect. She, the physiotherapist who kept her greatest secret. When Harrison Montgomery took on the sponsorship of the tournament, he never imagined that his own son, whom he didn't even know, was there and could change his legacy forever. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. A glossy black limousine glided up the curved driveway of the Riverdale Country Club, where a line of photographers waited with cameras ready. The day was bright, the sky an impossible blue that drew out the green of the manicured golf course behind the tall iron gates. As soon as the limo came to a stop, Harrison Montgomery stepped out. He smoothed the lapels of his tailored suit and took in the scene. The hushed prestige of the club, the watchful eyes of reporters, the promise of a high-stakes week in the air. Just as Harrison straightened his cufflinks, 3 or 4 photographers rushed forward. Questions flew at him, something about a sponsorship, a rumored scandal, even a personal jab he couldn't quite catch in the confusion. He offered a restrained nod instead of a comment, knowing from experience that anything he said would be picked apart. Flashes popped all around him as he strode toward the clubhouse entrance. He was met halfway by a perspiring man with anxious eyes. "Mr. Montgomery," the man said, pressing a thick file into his hands, "I apologize for the abrupt welcome, but these documents, they need your immediate attention." Harrison arched an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Edgar Wilcox," the man answered, still slightly out of breath. "Tournament organizer. It's an honor to have you here. I'm in charge of ensuring everything runs smoothly, but we've had some concerns about, certain aspects of the championship." Intrigued, Harrison opened the folder enough to glance at the top few pages. "Concerns?" he repeated quietly, skimming references to match irregularities and suspiciously identical scorecards. It was jargon-laden but hinted at something off. "I see." Edgar nodded vigorously. "I can explain more inside if that suits you. We want to make sure your sponsorship isn't overshadowed by any rumors." Harrison fixed him with a cool look. "Yes, I'll want to hear every detail." Meanwhile, a short distance away, Jasmine Carter knelt beside a massage table inside the physiotherapy tent. She was loosening the shoulder of a golfer who had tensed up during warm-ups. The squeak of the table and the hum of the air conditioner were the only sounds in the space, until the athlete murmured a complaint about how crowded the course was getting. Jasmine reassured him with a gentle, practiced touch. But the moment she looked out through the open flap of the tent, her breath caught in her throat. Beyond the bustle of the staff, she saw Harrison. His presence was unmistakable. Tall, self-assured, dark hair brushing the collar of his suit. She went completely still, recalling a swirl of memories she had tried for so long to bury. A flicker of anxiety rushed through her, and her hands nearly froze where they were. She forced a neutral expression and resumed her work, trying to swallow the unease building inside. The athlete noticed her sudden tension and asked if she was okay. Jasmine nodded without looking up. "I'm fine," she lied, pressing on with the massage. Over by the clubhouse, Harrison's longtime advisor, Michael, had stepped forward to greet him. Michael carried an iPad brimming with notes. "They're all waiting for you inside," he said under his breath, throwing a nervous look at the paparazzi. "Let's address this quietly. The last thing we need is a media frenzy on your first day here." Harrison gave a curt nod and fell into step beside Michael. "Apparently there's more going on than just golf," he muttered, gripping the folder a bit tighter. Inside, the corridors smelled of fresh polish and citrus-scented cleaning supplies. Voices echoed, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. Several staff members paused as Harrison passed, whispering behind half-lowered gazes. Edgar led them into a handsomely furnished office dominated by an oversized mahogany desk. The tournament director, a neatly dressed woman named Sheila, greeted Harrison with a cordial smile, though he detected worry behind her professional demeanor. She gestured to the seats. "We've had minor incidents," she began carefully. "Allegations of match-fixing that never amounted to anything. Mere gossip, if you ask me. Michael slid into a nearby chair, shoulders rigid. Harrison placed the folder on the desk, flipping to a page that had caught his attention. Gossip or not, my company has placed a substantial investment in this championship. I need the full picture. Sheila maintained her composure, though her eyes flickered with alarm when she saw the documents he'd been given. Rest assured, Mr. Montgomery, these matters are in hand. There's no cause for alarm. Harrison's tone was polite, yet firm. I have to make sure my name and my company's name doesn't get dragged through anything dubious. If there's even a hint of irregularity, we must address it. Before Sheila could respond, Harrison's gaze strayed to the open door. Standing in the background just outside was a man scribbling in a small notepad. He looked up, locked eyes with Harrison for a moment, and then offered a faint smirk. It struck Harrison as more self-satisfied than friendly, a silent challenge more than a greeting. Sheila followed his line of sight and sighed. That's Gavin Reynolds. He handles certain negotiations. We've asked him to look into improving media coverage for the tournament. Harrison didn't break his stare until Gavin turned on his heel and sauntered away. Something about that man set off alarms. I see, Harrison said softly, then refocused on Sheila. Meanwhile, Jasmine finished her work in the physiotherapy tent. She neatly arranged the towels and sterilized her equipment with methodical gestures, her mind miles away. Every beat of her heart seemed to echo a single refrain. He's here. She felt foolish for not anticipating that Harrison might appear. After all, he was the championship's top sponsor this year. But now she was faced with a question she had no simple answer for. What was she supposed to say to him? Would he even want to hear it? Flustered, she hurried out of the tent, hoping she could slip to the staff break area before crossing paths with Harrison. Each step ignited the memory of the last time they'd spoken. Too many years ago in a different city, when neither of them had any clue how drastically life would change. A staff member passed by, whispering excitedly to a colleague, "Did you hear? People are talking about the sponsor's personal drama." Jasmine caught the phrase and quickened her pace, trying to remain invisible. On the other side of the clubhouse, Harrison was in a corridor lined with framed photos of past champions when he stopped a staff member to ask for directions. The young man, a junior event assistant, quickly complied, then hesitated as though he wanted to say something. Harrison picked up on his unease. "Is there an issue?" The assistant looked around nervously. "Not sure if I should mention this, but there have been these rumors. Something about you having a child from years ago. People are whispering. You know how gossip spreads." Harrison felt a jolt. "A child?" He tried to keep his face impassive. "Ridiculous," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Before the assistant could reply, a cluster of paparazzi materialized at the end of the corridor. Their camera shutters sounded like a flurry of mechanical clicks. "Mr. Montgomery," they shouted. "Rumor has it you fathered a child out of wedlock. Any comment?" Security personnel swooped in, forming a barrier between the cameras and Harrison. One persistent reporter tried to push through, yelling something about an illegitimate son, sparking a brief but intense scuffle. Harrison's breath came faster. He pressed a hand against the security guard's shoulder. "Stand down," he said quietly, wanting to end the scene quickly. He turned to the paparazzi. "I have nothing to say about baseless gossip," he stated, voice controlled. The corridor fell quiet. As the reporters backed away, snapping a few last photos, Harrison squared his shoulders. He'd faced rumors before, but something about this one felt more personal. He exhaled, determined to focus on the tournament issues at hand. If there was a problem with rigged matches, he would sort that out. The rest could wait. Late that afternoon, Jasmine stood behind the physiotherapy tent, absent-mindedly scrolling through old photos on her phone. She paused at an image of a bright-eyed little boy smiling at a birthday party. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe she had done the right thing all this time by keeping her distance, But seeing Harrison today felt like a warning sign that her carefully built walls might be crumbling. At the same time, Harrison found a moment of solitude in a quiet corner of the clubhouse. He flipped to the final page of the urgent folder, scanning the explicit details of alleged payoffs and possible match-fixing orchestrated by unnamed parties. The deeper he read, the graver it looked. He sensed an undercurrent of corruption that could not be brushed aside. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm orange hues across the manicured greens, Harrison stepped outside. He spotted Jasmine on the far side of the fairway. Though the crowd had thinned, the fading sunlight revealed her silhouette. Their eyes met, and an unspoken charge passed between them. Unresolved conversations, unvoiced confessions, everything that had lingered in the space they'd once shared. Steeling himself, he made a move to walk toward her. She looked startled and immediately turned away, as if afraid to face him. Yet at that moment, a reporter standing nearby shouted, "Harrison, what about the child? Are you ever going to acknowledge him?" Harrison halted in his tracks, blood pounding in his ears. He stared after Jasmine, uncertain whether to follow or address this outburst. For the first time, he felt a rush of doubt. Was there something to these rumors he had dismissed so easily? Harrison tries to approach Jasmine, but she abruptly turns away. In that moment, a reporter shouts a question about the child. Harrison freezes, uncertain what to think, unsure if the rumor could be true. The moment after the reporter's voice cut through the air, Harrison stood rooted to the spot. All around him, the lush fairway spread out in a pristine arc, but he barely registered the immaculate grass or the serene backdrop. His mind echoed with the words, "the child," replaying them like a broken record. Nearby, the reporter flipped open a tabloid, its headline in bold print, "Mystery Son of Millionaire CEO?" Harrison felt the weight of a camera's lens on him. He forced his features into a controlled mask and nodded once at the reporter, indicating he had no comment. Yet inside, uncertainty hammered away. He recalled glimpses of Jasmine's startled face, how quickly she'd turned to avoid him, and the hush in her expression that betrayed more than words. He moved briskly toward the clubhouse, and Michael followed, his face drawn with concern. Once they were clear of the media, Harrison spun to face his advisor. "Have you ever heard anything about this?" he demanded, voice low with tension. "Is it possible I have a child?" Michael lifted both hands in a gesture of surrender. "Harrison, you know me. I handle all your affairs, but I've never heard a single whisper that you—" He sighed, searching for the right phrase. "If there was anything like that, I'd know, or at least suspect. This is news to me, too." Harrison studied him for a beat, trying to read any hint of evasion. But Michael's sincere confusion was plain enough, so Harrison turned away, his frustration mounting. In the short hallway leading into the main lounge, a swirl of participants and staff buzzed with activity, preparing for practice rounds. He spotted a glimpse of dark hair in the distance, Jasmine slipping through a door at the far end of the corridor, phone in hand. He couldn't make out her expression, but he could tell she was eager to avoid him. His gut twisted. The thought of confronting her felt like heading into unknown territory. Would she confirm the rumors, or deny them outright? And if they were true? He forced the idea aside and marched out toward the practice greens, hoping a moment of fresh air would help him clear his head. In the physiotherapy tent, Jasmine tried to tune out the persistent hum of her phone. The athlete seated before her was a well-known golfer who complained about tension in his lower back. As she positioned him on the table, her focus wandered. More staff had dropped by earlier, muttering about suspicious happenings around the championship. She overheard a whisper about certain matches seeming predetermined, and talk of undue influence. "It's ridiculous, isn't it?" the athlete asked, snapping Jasmine's attention back to him. She paused mid-stretch. "I'm sorry. What's ridiculous?" He let out a frustrated sigh. "I've heard there might be rigging going on. Some of the caddies have been overheard talking about it. It's all hush-hush, but if it's true, it could ruin our sport's reputation." He winced as she pressed a knot in his back. "No one's safe from rumors here." Jasmine offered a small nod, her gaze lingering on the open flap of the tent. Through it, she could make out the rolling green. She caught sight of a figure in a tailored suit crossing the grass. Harrison. He paused near a bunker, flipping through pages in a folder, looking every bit the sharp businessman on a mission. Her breath caught for an instant. Questions swirled in her mind. Should she approach him now before the rumors exploded further? Should she give him a chance to ask her directly? Or would that only accelerate the meltdown she was dreading? Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from a number she recognized and couldn't ignore. She quietly excused herself and stepped out of the tent. Around the same time, Gavin Reynolds prowled the corridors of the clubhouse, exchanging pleasantries with staff but always slipping in subtle inquiries. "Have you heard anything about Harrison Montgomery's secret family?" He'd murmur in a conspiratorial tone, brow furrowed as though deeply concerned. Each time he got a new snippet of rumor, an overheard conversation, a second-hand hint, he tucked it away, forming a puzzle piece in his mind. Outside, Harrison retreated to a small makeshift office set up for him beside the clubhouse, a space with a few chairs, a desk strewn with files, and a large window overlooking the fairway. He slammed the door behind him, still clutching the urgent folder the tournament organizer had given him. Distracting himself with the contents, he scanned references to suspiciously identical scorecards, late bets placed in specific matches, and a handful of staff who might be in on it. His concentration was interrupted when a junior staff member burst in, breathless. "Mr. Montgomery," the young woman said, "I didn't mean to bother you, but you should know there've been meetings late at night on the course. Some big players in the tournament, plus a few unknown faces. Security cameras can't quite pick them up. It's weird." She left before he could ask anything else, leaving him with fresh concerns. The deeper he looked into the allegations, the more this championship reeked of corruption. If word spread that he, as the main sponsor, had turned a blind eye to it, his company's image might never recover. On the far side of the grounds, Jasmine was slipping through a narrow path toward a staff break area when she overheard two caddies whispering, their conversation laced with tension. "I'm telling you, this is bigger than we think. Some guys are placing guaranteed bets. They act like the scores are already decided." One caddy gestured anxiously, his voice dropping to a hush when he spotted Jasmine. She pretended not to notice and hurried along, heart pounding at the suggestion of something so organized and nefarious. As she reached the break area, a simple row of lockers and a coffee machine, she replayed the last few minutes. People were on edge about match-fixing and shady dealings, all while the rumor of Harrison's supposed child was swirling like wildfire. Memories flooded her, and she sank onto a nearby bench, closing her eyes for an instant. She saw a younger version of herself, standing in a cramped bathroom, staring at a test that confirmed she was pregnant. The wave of fear and excitement at that time had nearly overwhelmed her. She'd thought about calling Harrison, but life had felt too complicated. The distance between them had grown, and she never found the right moment. A flurry of voices at the end of the hallway jolted her back to the present. When she opened her eyes, Harrison was there, scanning the lockers until he spotted her. His face carried the weight of 100 questions. Without preamble, he said, "Do these rumors have anything to do with you?" Her throat constricted. "Harrison, not here, please." He didn't move. "People keep asking about a child. My child. I don't like gossip, Jasmine, and I don't want my name dragged through some tabloid circus. But if there's truth to this..." She kept her gaze on the ground, swallowing hard. "We can't talk about it in the open. Meet me later, somewhere private." A flicker of hurt crossed his features, but he kept his voice steady. "Fine. But I won't let this linger any longer. I need answers." Before they could arrange a meeting spot or say another word, the doors to the break area flew open with a bang. A disgruntled ex-employee, someone who'd worked at the club in past seasons, stormed in, face bright red and fists clenched at his sides. "You people think you can just bury corruption," he bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at Jasmine, then at Harrison. "I know what's really going on. Payoffs, rigged results, the board's in on it. They fired me because I got too close." A few staff members rushed to calm the man, but he shook them off. He hurled accusations in every direction, almost foaming at the mouth with rage. Harrison tried to step in, raising his palms in a gesture of calm. "Listen, we're taking the claims seriously. We want the truth." The ex-employee spat on the floor. "Yeah, right. Just like you want the truth about your—" He didn't finish the sentence. Security finally grabbed him by the arm, dragging him toward the exit as he shouted about hidden documents and bank transfers. The disturbance echoed through the hallway, and in the chaos, Gavin Reynolds appeared at the far end, speaking quietly to a reporter. Almost instantly, rumors erupted anew about Harrison's illegitimate family. The reporter shot pointed questions at an event staffer, scribbling notes furiously. Jasmine's chest tightened. She could guess who'd tipped them off. Catching sight of Gavin's smirk made Harrison's blood run cold. He realized that half the media would be eating up every word, hungry for more scandal. He took a slow breath, recentering himself. Stress hammered at his temples. Not only was his sponsorship at stake, but he might be father to a child he never knew existed. Or was it just a lie? If there was any truth to the rumor, how could Jasmine hide it from him all these years? As the ex-employee's shouts faded, Jasmine threw a worried glance at Harrison. She seemed torn between fear and an urge to speak. Through the thinning crowd, she stepped backward, heading for the door. Harrison made a move to follow, but found himself momentarily blocked by two staff members trying to ask about the tournament meltdown. By the time he freed himself, he could see Jasmine nearing an exit that led outside to the area behind the clubhouse. She paused in the doorway, looking back at him. Her eyes glistened as if holding back tears, her voice catching when she finally spoke. "You have no idea how complicated this is." She vanished into the swarm of staff and reporters, leaving Harrison torn between investigating the fraud or chasing after her for the truth. Harrison Montgomery found himself unable to sleep after the latest uproar at the Riverdale Country Club. The ex-employee's rant, followed by Jasmine's elusive words, had left him restless, pacing the makeshift office he'd taken over. He flipped through the folder of suspicious tournament documents for the 10th time, each accusation of match manipulation gnawing at him. He was already under fire for supposedly harboring a secret child. The last thing he needed was to be tied to fraudulent dealings that could destroy his reputation. By the time the first rays of morning sun crept through the blinds, he decided to leave his cramped space for some fresh air. The corridors of the clubhouse were quiet, still dozing before the day's hectic schedule. Harrison walked slowly, noticing how the trophy cabinets gleamed under low lighting, how the black and white photos of past champions seemed to stare him down, challenging his integrity. The hush pressed on him, urging him to face things he'd rather ignore. He stepped outside and paused on a veranda that overlooked the course. The lawn was still heavy with dew, the sprinklers ticking softly. In the distance, a few early birds among the players were already on the driving range. Against this peaceful backdrop, all he could think about were the swirling rumors of a child. A nagging voice in his head kept asking if he was really so certain it wasn't true. He made his way to a small patio near the physiotherapy tent, hoping to catch Jasmine before the day's rush. He wasn't even sure how he'd broach the subject again, given how she had darted away from him last time. Yet he was determined to get answers. She wasn't there, but a note on the door suggested the staff had started the morning rounds earlier. He turned away, only to nearly collide with Gavin Reynolds, who materialized so suddenly it seemed he'd been waiting. Gavin offered a polite smile, though there was a cold glint in his eyes. "Early start," Gavin remarked. "I admire your dedication, though I suppose a big sponsor has plenty on his mind, especially these days." Harrison tensed, trying to keep his voice level. If you've come to discuss the rumors swirling around, I'll spare you the time. I have no comment on anything personal. Gavin lifted his brows. Is that so? Because the tournament's credibility might hinge on how you handle personal matters. People are talking, Harrison. Things can get messy. He paused, then took a step closer, lowering his voice. I'm only offering a friendly warning. Harrison's jaw clenched. Every instinct told him Gavin was playing a game, and he had no patience for it. Whatever you're implying, get to the point, he said. Gavin just smiled. I'm sure you'll figure things out, he said smoothly. I'll see you around. With that, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the corridor leading back into the clubhouse. Harrison stared after him, seething. How exactly did Gavin plan to use this rumor against him? He forced himself to focus on the immediate priority, speaking to Jasmine. He found her at last in the physiotherapy area, massaging the knee of a golfer who winced whenever she shifted his leg. Despite the tension in the air, she was a picture of calm professionalism. She barely spared Harrison a glance when he entered. Once she finished tending to the athlete, he approached. We need to talk, he said quietly, but firmly. She nodded, though her gaze flicked around to check if others were listening. Give me 5 minutes. They walked side by side to a terrace at the far edge of the clubhouse. It was quiet there, a spot with a small outdoor table and a few chairs. Jasmine kept her arms folded as though she was cold, even though the morning sun was already warming the air. Harrison inhaled, trying to sound calm. These rumors about a child, are they about you and me? Jasmine's eyes lowered, and for a moment she seemed unable to speak. Then she gave a short nod. Yes, she whispered. A charged silence stretched between them. The roar of a lawnmower out on the greens provided a distant buzz. Harrison felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, and an odd sense of relief at finally having some clarity. So, there is a child? He asked, voice unsteady. She licked her lips, gaze darting away. Yes, she said again, no louder than before. And before you ask why I never told you, trust me, I had my reasons. It wasn't some game or act of cruelty. I didn't know how to handle it back then. We were in different places, and by the time I thought about telling you, too much time had passed and I was scared. Harrison felt as if the ground had tilted under his feet. All the businesslike composure he prided himself on seemed to vanish. You should have told me, he said quietly. I could have helped. She swallowed, blinking back moisture that threatened to fill her eyes. I didn't think you'd want to deal with it, or that you'd believe me. I saw how you were with your life, your ambitions. I told myself it was better to raise him on my own. He raked a hand through his hair. His heart pounded at the realization that for years, somewhere out there, he had a son. What's his name? Jasmine hesitated, pressing her lips together before saying, His name is... Before she could finish, someone burst out of the clubhouse doors. Michael rushed toward them, an urgent look on his face. Harrison, sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation inside. The tournament organizer needs you. Something about new evidence of rigging has surfaced. Harrison exhaled shakily, meeting Jasmine's eyes. We'll continue this, he promised, voice laced with a mixture of resolve and raw emotion. She nodded, and they parted ways, each looking more burdened than before. Inside, the day was already unraveling. A wave of staff dashed about, exchanging frantic whispers and scanning official papers. At the center of it all stood Edgar Wilcox, the same man who had greeted Harrison upon his arrival. His brow shone with perspiration under the bright overhead lights. Harrison, it's bad, Edgar muttered. Someone's been leaking rumors that you're complicit in the rigging. They claim you paid off certain officials to guarantee outcomes. There's even a fake set of bank transfers with your name on them. Michael's posture stiffened. They've got to be forged. We need to show proof. The real records... Edgar cut him off. We're trying to gather that proof, but the tournament's board is in a panic. They're worried your sponsorship might become a liability. Harrison's temper flared. He'd spent years building his company's integrity, and now it was under siege. He heard the frantic chatter around him, someone mentioning bribes, others referencing hush money. It was all swirling, unstoppable. He turned to Michael. "We need to track down who's behind this. I'm guessing Gavin's involved, but I have to be sure." Just then, Jasmine's voice rose above the commotion. "Harrison, come here for a second," she said, standing near a desk stacked with files. She held a stack of printed emails from an anonymous tipster. "These were sent to the physiotherapy department's general inbox," she explained quietly. "Maybe because they knew staff were easier to reach. It names certain players and officials. It's loaded with details, times, places, even phone numbers. I'm not sure if it's legitimate, but it looks real." Harrison scanned the pages. The volume of information was staggering. "This is exactly what we need," he said, adrenaline pumping. "If these are genuine, we can trace the chain back to whoever's orchestrating this whole mess." Jasmine nodded, her expression torn between relief and apprehension. "I hope it helps you, but also, be careful. This is all happening fast, and someone out there wants to protect themselves by destroying you." He recognized the flicker of fear in her eyes, the same fear that had kept her silent for years. He reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. "I'll make sure the truth comes out," he said, letting a rare moment of tenderness slip through his guarded demeanor. "And about what we were discussing before, I want to hear everything. I won't run from it." Jasmine managed a small, shaky smile. "Okay," she whispered. Their moment was cut short by a noisy commotion in the foyer. A cluster of cameras flashed as reporters pushed inside. Security guards tried in vain to block them. Harrison caught snatches of their shouted questions. "Care to comment on the accusations? Is it true you're paying off officials? What about the love child rumor?" In the midst of the uproar, Gavin appeared again. This time he wore an expression of false sympathy as he chatted with a well-known journalist, lightly touching her elbow as though confiding in a friend. Harrison glared at him across the foyer, suspicion roiling like a storm in his gut. He suspected Gavin had planted more than a few seeds of chaos. Harrison spent the rest of the day in tense meetings, scanning documents, calling lawyers, and repeating the same explanation. The fraudulent records implicating him were entirely fabricated. His mind kept straying back to Jasmine's revelation. Each time he recalled the moment she admitted to having his child, his pulse quickened, a mix of guilt and a strange, protective instinct welling up in him. By the time the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the golf course in hues of gold and pink, Harrison felt almost numb from exhaustion. He stood on a wide balcony that overlooked the 18th hole, phone in hand. The sky's colors slowly deepened, and the silhouettes of late golfers blended into the waning light. A sudden vibration in his palm pulled him from his reverie. He glanced at the screen. A new message. The sender's ID was blocked, but the text displayed clearly, "If you want to save your reputation, meet me tonight. Come alone." It was signed with a single initial, G. As the sun sets over the fairway, Harrison's phone lights up with a message from Gavin. "If you want to save your reputation, meet me tonight. Come alone." Harrison stood under the glow of the moonlight, the swish of a distant sprinkler the only sound cutting through the hush of the golf course. He found himself at the deserted driving range, following the cryptic message Gavin had sent. The day's tension weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the precarious situation he was in. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. A light breeze brushed across the grass, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut turf. He glanced at his watch. Almost midnight. The shadows played tricks on his vision, but at last he spotted a figure stepping out from behind a line of tall hedges. Gavin. The man's silhouette was outlined by a few distant lights, and as he walked closer, Harrison could make out the self-satisfied twist to his lips. "You came," Gavin said, sounding smug. "I take it you received my message." Harrison kept his expression neutral. "What do you want?" Gavin circled him slowly, as though admiring his own handiwork. "I want you to back off," he said. "All these investigations into the so-called rigging, the way you're digging for evidence, it's not good for anyone. Certainly not for you." Harrison studied Gavin's face, looking for a hint of the man's endgame. "So this is a cover-up," he said, "and you're threatening me if I don't drop the matter." Gavin chuckled softly. "Let's just say, sometimes it's best not to scratch too hard at certain surfaces. You might find things you'd rather not see." His eyes glimmered with a cold warning. "You've got enough on your plate. A scandal involving your business ties, rumors about a child you never acknowledged, all those headlines just waiting to go viral." Harrison clenched his jaw. The flash of Jasmine's face crossed his mind. The way she'd admitted he had a son, her voice barely above a whisper. He wondered how much Gavin knew or was simply guessing. "Those rumors are none of your concern," he said. "On the contrary," Gavin replied, taking a step closer. "I can make sure they stay rumors, or I can turn them into a major news story that'll destroy your image as the brilliant, unstoppable CEO. It's your call." Harrison tried to keep his composure, but a flicker of fear passed through him. He'd faced business competitors before, endured tough negotiations, but nothing quite like this. "You're blackmailing me." Gavin only shrugged. "If you want to call it that, fine. Or you can see it as a gentleman's agreement. You stop investigating, and the tabloids remain quiet about your personal secret. And believe me, they would love to tear you apart if they get proof of your hidden family. Can you imagine the headlines?" For a long moment, Harrison didn't speak. He wanted to lunge at Gavin to shout back that he wouldn't be bullied, but the weight of his uncertain fatherhood pressed down on him. Finally, he forced out a steady breath. "I won't be part of any corruption. I won't let you bury evidence if there's fraud in this tournament." Gavin's smile died away. "Think carefully. The moment I walk away, I'll make sure the cameras are all pointed at you and your child. If you can't see how that ends, you're more naive than I thought." He let that linger for a moment, then turned and strode away, disappearing into the shadows as smoothly as he'd arrived. Harrison remained where he was, heart thudding in his chest. His mind reeled with the implications. If he stopped investigating, he might lose his integrity. If he pressed on, Gavin would target not just him, but Jasmine and the child. Part of him itched to chase after Gavin, to confront him physically, but that wouldn't solve anything. It might even play straight into Gavin's plan. Back at the clubhouse, the corridors were mostly dark. Jasmine had decided to stay late, hoping to avoid attention while she tidied up the physiotherapy station. Yet as she turned a corner, she spotted an unmarked envelope leaning against the door. It had no name or label, just a neat slip of paper inside when she opened it, and a single photograph. It showed her son playing in the parking lot of a local cafe earlier that very afternoon. The angle suggested it had been taken from a car window. The sight made her stomach lurch. Whoever sent it wanted her to know they were watching, and that message could only mean one thing. She and her boy were pawns in a bigger game. Hands trembling, Jasmine shut the door and locked it. She couldn't stand still. Pacing around the small physiotherapy room, she took her phone from her pocket. She was about to call home to confirm everything was fine, but paused, half afraid of what she might discover. After a few painful seconds, she pressed the number anyway. Her mother answered, sounding a bit startled. "Everything okay?" Jasmine asked if her son was asleep, hearing the relief in her own voice when her mother confirmed that he was tucked in, safe and sound. She didn't mention the photo. She just whispered a thank you and ended the call, feeling a spark of anger light inside her. Someone had the nerve to threaten her child's safety, to manipulate Harrison. She couldn't let that stand. Determined, she hurried out of the physiotherapy room and went searching for Harrison. She found him minutes later in his small office, staring at the phone in his hand with a haunted expression. He looked up as she entered, and she could see in his eyes that something had gone very wrong. "Gavin threatened me," Harrison said flatly, running a hand over his face. He wants me to bury the investigation or he'll go public with everything, especially the child. Jasmine hesitated, then held out the photo. I got this tonight. It's my son, taken today. I have no idea who sent it, but... Her voice wavered. Gavin has connections to people who dig up dirt for a living. He could have had someone follow me or my family. Harrison's jaw tightened as he studied the photo. When he looked back at her, there was a flash of raw protectiveness. This is going too far, he said. I can handle them dragging me through the mud, but your son? That's where I draw the line. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, they shared a sense of solidarity they hadn't felt in years. Both were under threat, and both needed each other to stand any chance of fighting back. We have to expose what's really happening, Jasmine said. If they think they can use him against me, or leverage you into some cover-up, they'll just keep pushing. Harrison nodded, though a knot of fear tightened in his chest. Agreed. Michael and I have been gathering all the evidence we can find, but we're missing key pieces. Gavin's trying to force me to back down. That means he's definitely hiding something bigger. Paparazzi lights flashed through the windows just then, catching them both off guard. Harrison pulled the blinds shut. Journalists had grown bolder in the past few hours, scouring the clubhouse for anything to feed the scandal. It put everyone on edge, even staff who had no stake in the matter. Jasmine glanced out a side window, spotting a few camera-toting individuals drifting around the parking lot. They're everywhere, she muttered. Any hint of new drama, and they'll pounce. Harrison mustered a grim smile. Let them. Meanwhile, we'll do what we must. He took her to see Michael, who had been poring over tournament records in a small back office. Under his breath, Michael updated them on the latest. Rumors of payoffs involving a few top players and caddies, suspicious bank transactions that seemed to link back to Gavin. Before they could go deeper, the tournament organizer himself barged in. His face was drawn, a sheen of perspiration on his brow. Harrison, we can't keep dealing with these conflicts. The board is worried that if your personal scandal escalates, it'll destroy the tournament's reputation. Harrison set his jaw, refusing to be cowed. If there's fraud going on, we can't pretend it doesn't exist. Don't tell me to drop this just because you're afraid of bad press. The organizer sighed. Look, you're stepping into areas you don't fully grasp. This is club politics. Let me handle it. Harrison refused to relent. Are you implying Gavin's not alone in this? You know he's behind the intimidation, forging documents, possibly blackmailing people. Stop, the organizer snapped, panic flickering in his eyes. You'll make things worse if you keep throwing accusations around. The man left as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Michael frowned, glancing at Harrison. Did you catch what he said? He basically admitted Gavin isn't working solo. Jasmine's expression remained resolute. She reached inside her bag and retrieved the threatening photo again, her hand shaking slightly. We have to move fast. This isn't going to end on its own. Harrison gently set a hand on her arm. Tonight, I'll search the archives for anything connecting Gavin to the bigger players involved. If we can find one definitive record or a paper trail, we can corner him. Under cover of darkness, once most of the staff had gone home, Harrison quietly made his way to the tournament archives. The small room smelled of stale air and dust. Boxes labeled with past year's records lined metal shelves. A single lamp cast long shadows on the floor. He spent a good hour sifting through folders, scanning documents about sponsorship deals, match schedules, emails, anything that might reveal who was pulling the strings behind Gavin. Old receipts, contract addendums, references to mysterious transactions. Gradually, he sensed he was close to stumbling onto something significant, especially when he discovered a box with "Personnel Confidential" scribbled on the front in black marker. He had just opened it when the door creaked. Harrison jerked his head up to see a security guard standing there, baton in hand, a no-nonsense expression on his face. "You're not authorized to be here, sir," the guard announced, stepping closer. "I'm going to have to escort you out." Harrison tried to protest. "Listen, I'm the major sponsor. I have every right—" But the guard wouldn't hear it, gesturing with his baton. Reluctantly, Harrison set down the box and followed the guard. As they moved into the hallway, his gaze fell on a thick file near the top of the open container. Partially visible on the cover was a single word in bold letters. "Confidential, Trig." The rest was cut off by the page margin. His heart slammed in his chest. As the guard escorts him out, Harrison sees a folder labeled "Confidential, Trig," truncated by a page margin. His eyes widen. Could it really say Trig, as in triplets? Early the next morning, Harrison returned to the tournament archives as soon as the clubhouse doors opened. The building still carried the hush of dawn, and the faint smell of coffee wafted through empty corridors. He walked with purpose toward the room where he'd stumbled upon that puzzling folder the night before. He froze in the doorway. The overhead lights were already on, and someone had tidied up every box and file. His heart thudded when he saw the shelf labeled "Personnel Confidential" sitting far too neatly. He ran a searching gaze across the rows of identical boxes, but the one he'd left open was missing. Michael stepped in behind him, adjusting his tie with tense fingers. "So, this is where they kicked you out last night?" he asked quietly, scanning the room. Harrison nodded grimly. "I saw something labeled Confidential, Trig, but now the entire box is gone." He shot Michael a pointed look. "You still think it might not be related?" Michael exhaled slowly. "I don't know. Trig could mean anything, some code, an abbreviation for triggering document. It might not be about—" Harrison turned away, raking a hand through his hair. "My instincts say otherwise. Gavin's cornered me about a secret child, threatened to expose me, and now I find something referring to Trig. Come on, Michael. It's not a coincidence." He pulled open a nearby drawer, sifting through files with an air of desperation. Not a trace of the folder. Each label he read felt like a dead end. Membership rosters, staff rosters, past sponsorship agreements. Everything but what he sought. Eventually he gave up, sinking into a chair with frustration etched on his face. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "Look, we'll keep digging. This whole place is on edge. Someone must have grabbed that file and hidden it. Maybe we can figure out who had early morning access." Harrison glanced at his watch, remembering he had a meeting with the tournament organizer soon. "Fine," he muttered. "But watch Gavin. If anyone's covering their tracks, it's him." They left the archives, stepping back into the main hallway where tournament staff were already bustling about. The day felt electric with anxiety. Conversation and movement had a staccato pace, as though everyone feared some new revelation might topple the entire championship. Meanwhile, in the physiotherapy tent, Jasmine was treating a golfer for a sprained wrist. She gave him instructions to gently rotate his arm and ice it afterward. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying her brief conversation with Harrison from the night before. He'd mentioned seeing a suspicious folder, something that hinted at Trig. She had felt an immediate jolt of unease. Could he be that close to discovering the truth, all of it, in one fell swoop? The athlete winced under her touch. "Sorry," she murmured, adjusting her approach. She finished the session quickly and stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. As soon as she checked her phone, she saw 3 missed calls from home. Her mother had sent pictures of her 3 boys, each in various states of morning chaos, cereal on one face, a shoe on the wrong foot, and a victorious grin from the third who had apparently outrun his brothers in some small race around the kitchen. Jasmine stared at the pictures, a pang of love tightening her chest. She longed to be with them, to hold them close and keep them out of harm's way. But she couldn't just leave. Not when threats lingered everywhere. Not when Harrison was teetering on the edge of finding out the entire truth. She closed her eyes for a second, steeling herself, then headed toward the staff lounge to clear her head. She hadn't made it more than a dozen steps before Harrison spotted her from across the corridor. The urgency in his face made her heart skip. He caught up with her, voice pitched low so passers-by wouldn't overhear. "We need to talk in private," he said, glancing around. She nodded. "Let's go upstairs. There's a small conference room nobody uses this early." They walked quickly, ignoring a few curious glances. Once inside the room, she locked the door. The space was simple: a round table, 4 chairs, and a window overlooking the practice greens. Harrison folded his arms, tension rolling off him in waves. She spoke first. "I know you found something last night, or almost did." He nodded. "It disappeared before I could see everything. Confidential. Trig. That's all I got." He paused, studying her. "Jasmine, is there more than one child? Is that what Trig stands for?" Her expression tightened. "You have to understand, I never intended to hide this forever." He held up a hand. "Stop. Just tell me. Are there more?" She lowered her eyes, inhaling slowly. Her next words came out in a whisper, so faint he had to lean in to catch them. "Yes. 3. Harrison's eyes went wide. He'd braced himself for a possibility of twins, maybe. But 3? That single word seemed to echo in the hush of the room, crashing through every assumption he'd clung to. His mind reeled at the implications. "You're telling me," he said carefully, "that I have 3 sons? Triplets?" Tears glistened in her eyes and she gave a tiny nod. "They're healthy. They're wonderful. And they know nothing about you. I've kept them away from all this, for their safety." He let out a shaky breath, feeling anger, awe, guilt, and protectiveness swirl through him all at once. "Jasmine, you should have told me from day one." She swallowed hard. "I know. I was scared. You were so focused on your business empire, traveling the world, making headline deals. I didn't see how telling you would do any good. And then years passed, and it got harder and harder to say anything. I couldn't bear the idea of them being used as leverage if people found out." At that, a ripple of cold realization passed through him. "Which is exactly what Gavin's trying to do now, isn't it?" She closed her eyes, pain etched across her features. "He might. He's already sending me threats, pictures of my boys. That's how I know he has people watching. So yes, I've been terrified." Harrison stood there in silent turmoil. A part of him wanted to demand more answers, dates, details, everything. Another part of him wanted to just pull her close and vow that he'd keep the children safe. But a knock on the door broke through the charged silence. One of the club's security personnel announced they needed the room for a meeting in a few minutes, adding that the staff were alarmed by potential leaks to the media. Harrison and Jasmine, forced out, left by a side entrance to avoid a crowd of journalists assembling nearby. Outside, they bumped into Michael, who had been frantically searching for Harrison. "There you are," he said. "I've got more leads on this fraud investigation. A caddie's gone missing. Nobody's seen him since late last night." Jasmine paled. "I heard something about that from a colleague. Some caddie vanished after telling people he had info on rigged matches." Michael lowered his voice. "If he had hard evidence, Gavin's probably involved in his disappearance too. We need to find him. He might be the key to clearing your name." Harrison nodded. "Or Gavin plans to silence anyone with proof." His gaze flickered to Jasmine, protective worry clouding his features as he remembered the photos of her sons. She pressed a hand to her temple. "So everything's unraveling. We have a missing caddie who might confirm the fraud. We have Gavin ready to blow up your personal life if you don't back off. And now I've told you about the boys." The 3 of them huddled in a corner near the loading docks, away from prying eyes. Workers rolled boxes of promotional materials into a storage area, but otherwise nobody was around. Michael showed them a text message he'd received from an unknown number. "Stop looking for me, or you'll end up in more trouble than you can handle." Harrison recognized the menacing tone of it. Gavin's stepping up the pressure on everyone. He's probably using the child story for blackmail, but now I know it's triplets. His face took on a determined cast. There's no chance I'm letting him hold that over me. I won't let him threaten my family." Jasmine's expression softened at his words. "What are you going to do?" He glanced at Michael, who answered, "We keep gathering evidence against Gavin. The more we have, the less he can blackmail you. But we do it carefully. If we rattle him too hard, he'll lash out at the children." Jasmine, heart thudding, realized they were all in deeper than she'd ever imagined. She swallowed, resolved. "I'll do whatever it takes to help. I have some ties to the players. Maybe I can get statements that point to who's benefiting from the rigged scores." Michael nodded. "Every piece helps." Before they could discuss further, a commotion erupted near the clubhouse doors. A uniformed guard sprinted across the manicured lawn, heading for the tournament's main office. Harrison, Jasmine, and Michael exchanged uneasy looks. More trouble, no doubt. As if on cue, one of the junior staff ran up, breathless. "Harrison, the press just got hold of new allegations linking you to bribes. They're saying you've been funding the fraud the whole time." Jasmine's eyes widened with fear, and Michael muttered a curse. Harrison felt the ground shift under his feet. If the press believed that, it could ruin not only his sponsorship, but also his entire business empire. He set his jaw, voice trembling with anger. "It's all lies. Gavin must be behind it. We've got to prove it before this spins completely out of control." Their conversation was cut short by a surge of reporters bursting outside the clubhouse. Cameras flashed, capturing every jittery expression, every fraught glance. Harrison steeled himself, half expecting them to ask about his hidden children any second. But their questions focused on the alleged bribes, echoing through the bright morning light. Jasmine touched his arm. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "But please be careful. If they start digging deeper, they'll find out about my kids in more concrete ways." He nodded firmly. "I promise. I'm not letting Gavin bully us, or put them in danger." They parted ways, each consumed by a swirl of fear and determination. For Harrison, the knowledge that he wasn't just a father but the father of 3 had changed everything. He couldn't stand idly by while Gavin threatened to use innocent children as a bargaining chip. At the same time, proving his innocence in this rigging scandal was essential, or he'd never be able to offer those kids a stable future. As he watched Jasmine hurry off toward the physiotherapy tent, he felt a surge of protectiveness so strong it surprised him. No matter how complicated things had been between them, no one would harm her or the boys on his watch. He opened his phone, scanning through his messages. One in particular caught his eye, an anonymous tip from someone claiming to have seen Gavin meeting with a high-ranking tournament official in secret. This might be a lead. If he could gather enough proof, maybe it would all come tumbling down. Harrison stands in the corridor, eyes blazing, declaring he won't let anyone threaten his children. A journalist snaps a photo of his intense expression, capturing the moment he decides to fight back. A bright flash went off, and for a moment, Harrison couldn't see anything but white spots in his vision. The journalist who took the photo looked smug as he lowered his camera. Harrison clenched his jaw, then turned to Michael, who stood nearby with tension written across his features. "This ends now," Harrison said under his breath. He took one final glance at the press crowd pushing closer, then stepped inside a corridor that led to a back office. Michael hurried after him, shoving aside the door to grant Harrison space to pass. The hallway was quieter, the hum of the overhead lights a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Together they marched toward a small conference room where the tournament director Sheila waited behind a cluttered desk. She looked pale, her usual composure shaken. "We have a problem," Harrison announced, tossing a few printed documents onto the desk. "These are partial records showing where bets were placed right before matches began, patterns suggesting some players already knew their final score in advance." Sheila swallowed, glancing at Michael, then back at Harrison. "I don't know what to say. The board is panicking. They think these rumors could destroy this entire championship, not to mention your reputation as sponsor." Harrison tried to remain calm, though his pulse hammered. "This isn't just a rumor. We've traced suspicious bets, all coordinated. And we believe Gavin Reynolds is involved, possibly more people behind him. She folded her hands as if to steady them. Let's not jump to naming names. We don't know who else is pulling strings. There could be outside forces influencing this, gambling rings, high-level investors. We can't be sure. A tremor in her voice suggested she was searching for any excuse to deflect responsibility. Michael stepped forward, leaning on the desk. We need the club's cooperation to expose what's happening. If we can't count on it, then every day that passes makes it look like Harrison's complicit. Sheila's anxious gaze flicked to the papers. Then, with a sigh, she tried to muster some authority. I'll bring this to the board, but please, discretion is key. The press is already swarming. Just then, the shrill ringtone of a phone echoed in the hallway. It was Jasmine's, left on vibrate inside her lab coat pocket. She'd arrived at the meeting a second late and hovered in the background, not wanting to intrude. Catching sight of the caller ID, she excused herself, stepping aside. The line crackled as she picked up, tension knotting her stomach. Her mother's voice spilled out, a worried tremor weaving through each word. There was a man outside the house. He was asking around, trying to find out if any children live here. The neighbors chased him off, but Jasmine's breath caught. She cast a quick look at Harrison, who was in the midst of pressing Sheila for more transparency. Are the boys okay? She whispered into the phone. They're fine, just a little rattled. But who are these people? Why are they snooping? Jasmine closed her eyes. I don't know. Just keep the door locked and call the police if they come back. She ended the call, a flicker of alarm rippling across her face. Harrison noticed from the corner of his eye and moved closer, resting a hand on her arm. Is everything all right? Her voice shook. Strangers have been asking questions about my children. I'm afraid this is Gavin's doing, or at least someone connected to him. They're trying to intimidate me. A cold anger sparked in Harrison's eyes. He's crossing the line. If anything happens to those kids... She found herself squeezing his hand briefly, grateful for his concern. I just want them safe. The more Gavin feels cornered, the more he'll lash out. Michael, overhearing, pulled Harrison aside. We need to neutralize him. If he keeps using the children as leverage, you'll never be able to keep your name clean in this tournament. He'll spin every rumor into headlines. Harrison nodded. Then we turn the tables. We expose his operation before he can paint me as the villain. He led them away from the office to the main hallway again, searching for a hint of Gavin's whereabouts. They found him soon enough, leaning casually against a pillar near the trophy case, looking as if he owned the place. As soon as Gavin saw them approach, he straightened, a polished smile forming on his lips. "Good morning, Harrison," he drawled. "I hear the press is all over you." Harrison took a step forward, fists clenched at his sides. "Cut the act, Gavin. You're behind the fraudulent betting and now you're harassing Jasmine's family, threatening to turn my personal life into a scandal." Gavin didn't blink. "Be careful with accusations. I wouldn't want you to say something you can't prove." Then, more softly, "That might hurt your... family. Even more." Rage flared in Harrison's chest and he lunged, grabbing the lapel of Gavin's expensive blazer. Instantly, 2 security guards rushed in, pulling them apart before a fight could break out. Jasmine gasped, stepping back to avoid getting caught in the scuffle. Michael placed a restraining hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Calm down," Gavin said smoothly as the guards held him at arm's length. "You of all people know how easily stories get twisted. It would be a shame if the world learned of your secret children from, say, a very public news blast." Harrison's eyes flashed. "I'll go public with everything before you can sabotage me. People will see right through your blackmail." "That's where you're mistaken." Gavin brushed imaginary dust from his sleeve. "Who do you think they'll believe? The man already accused of bribing officials and lying about his own children? Or me, a concerned consultant who's just stumbled upon these unfortunate revelations?" Harrison watched Gavin walk away, steps echoing triumphantly. The tension in the hall was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jasmine took a shaky breath, and Michael stared down at the floor. A short while later, a concerned tournament staffer approached Jasmine near the physiotherapy tent. The staffer looked around nervously, then leaned in. I overheard a conversation about payments to certain players. There's a big spreadsheet with sums, deposit dates. It's all hush-hush, but I've seen it with my own eyes. Jasmine listened carefully, heart pounding. Do you know who's behind it? The staffer shook her head. I saw the name G. Reynolds on some lines, but the bigger payments came from an account labeled with initials. Might be someone else backing him. She thanked the staffer and hurried off to find Michael. When she caught up with him in a quiet corner, he revealed a discovery of his own. We just got a tip. These are real financial records that tie Gavin to known match fixers. We can trace the bribes. Jasmine felt a rush of hope. Then we can expose him. Show the board that Harrison is innocent. Michael nodded, gathering the documents. Exactly. We'll need to be careful. He'll do whatever it takes to bury this. Shaken but resolute, Jasmine sought out Harrison, who was pacing in the courtyard, occasionally glancing toward the gate as if expecting more reporters. She bit her lip, gathering her courage. I need to tell you everything, she said, about the triplets and how it was for me these past years. I know you're angry, but I want you to understand. He paused his pacing, turning to face her. I'm listening. She took a breath, stepping forward. After we parted ways back then, I found out I was pregnant. I was scared. No, terrified. I waited for the right moment to tell you, but there never seemed to be one. Then I discovered it was triplets. My medical bills skyrocketed. I had to move in with my mother for a while. I was overwhelmed. He softened, pain flickering in his eyes. You should have called me. I might have been busy building my company, but that doesn't mean I would have turned you away. She nodded, tears brimming. I realized that too late. I convinced myself you'd think I was lying or trying to trap you. I didn't want them to become pawns in your corporate world or in gossip. So I stayed silent, and I'm sorry. Harrison's jaw tightened. You don't have to apologize for protecting them, but I could have helped. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed. She read a text message, eyes widening. Someone's about to go public with a story about your child, your children. A journalist just posted a teaser online. CEO's secret fatherhood revealed. They'll probably name me, or at least hint at who I am. Harrison cursed softly under his breath. Then we're out of time. If they break this story without context, Gavin will twist it into a deadbeat father narrative. He looked away, thinking. The only path he saw was a risky one. A press conference, telling the truth himself. Because if he didn't, he risked losing any control of the situation. Maybe I should gather the media and lay it all out. The rigging scheme, the lies, everything. Jasmine's eyes went wide. That's a huge gamble. My children... He reached for her hand. Their faces don't need to be plastered everywhere, but hiding will only make it worse. Gavin's counting on us being too scared to speak. She swallowed, deeply uneasy. I don't want them caught in the crossfire, but maybe you're right. We can't let Gavin blackmail us any longer. That night, Harrison sat alone in his hotel suite, the lights of the city winking beyond the large windows. His phone lay on the coffee table, screen dark. He couldn't stop envisioning a press conference, cameras pointed at him, grilled about fatherhood and bribes. Was he ready to confess his role in the children's lives, roles he hadn't known about until recently, to protect them? A knock at the door startled him. It's me, Michael called from the hallway, voice pitched with urgency. Harrison opened the door, letting Michael in. His advisor looked rattled, sweat forming at his temples. Gavin just released a statement, Michael said, breathless. He's accusing you of bankrolling the entire fraud. Harrison stared at Michael, feeling his heart jolt as he heard the accusation. He's accusing me of bankrolling the entire fraud? He repeated, disbelief making his voice crack slightly. He saw the worry etched on Michael's face, the way he clutched his phone like it was a hand grenade about to explode. Michael nodded. Gavin posted an official statement online, hinting he has incontrovertible proof that you've been paying off tournament officials and players. The media is eating it up. Harrison felt a surge of anger. Proof, he muttered. I'd love to see what he's fabricated this time. He threw on a jacket and moved toward the door of the hotel suite, Michael on his heels. Come on, we need to do damage control. They made their way downstairs to the lobby, where a handful of reporters waited, snapping photos. Cameras flashed, and a microphone was thrust at Harrison's face before he even exited the elevator. Mr. Montgomery, do you deny these allegations that you funded the match-fixing scheme? A journalist asked, voice tense with excitement. Is it true you threatened to ruin the careers of players who wouldn't cooperate? Another yelled. Harrison kept his head high, his expression impassive. I categorically deny these false accusations. My team and I are gathering the real facts. Security pushed the reporters back, giving Harrison and Michael enough room to slip out a side entrance. Even so, Harrison could feel the intensity of the stares on his back, the swirl of rumors building like a tornado behind him. Once outside, they ducked into a waiting car. The driver nodded to Michael, and the vehicle peeled away from the curb. The city streets flashed by in a blur of headlights and neon signs, yet all Harrison could see in his mind's eye was Gavin's smug grin. Every time he thought about it, fury bubbled up, threatening to shatter his composure. Where to? The driver asked, checking the rearview mirror. Harrison turned to Michael. We need to talk to the tournament board. They can't believe Gavin's lies if we show them the real evidence we've got. Michael nodded, scrolling on his phone. Let me see if Sheila can arrange a meeting in the next hour. The board's in chaos, but we might still have some allies. As they headed toward Riverdale Country Club, the phone in Harrison's pocket buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting more bad news, but it was Jasmine. Her tone, when he answered, was both relieved and tense. Harrison, are you okay? I'm fine, he said through clenched teeth. Gavin's cranked up the pressure. Now he's spinning a story that I'm the mastermind behind all of this. She let out a frustrated sigh. I'm worried. I've had calls all morning, media types hounding me to confirm if you've been paying off officials. They're also fishing about the triplets, but I'm not saying a word. He pictured her expression, the worry lines on her forehead, and wished he could fix this. Look, keep the boys out of sight. We'll get through this. Michael and I are on our way to meet the board. All right, please be careful, she said softly. There was a pause. And, thank you for standing up for us. I know it's complicated. He only nodded, though she couldn't see him. I'll call you later. Moments later, they arrived at the country club's side gate. The guard, recognizing Harrison's car, waved them through. Even from a distance, they could see paparazzi clustered near the main entrance. A security team had placed barricades and was doing its best to prevent them from flooding the premises. Inside the clubhouse, tension simmered like a pot on the verge of boiling over. Staffers whispered in corners, and a group of professional players passed by, shooting Harrison distrustful glances. He realized that Gavin's smear campaign was working. People were starting to doubt him. They found Sheila pacing outside the conference room. The lines around her eyes looked deeper than usual. They're waiting for you, she said, opening the door. I tried to talk sense into them, but after Gavin's announcement, Harrison stepped into the room, scanning the anxious faces of the board members seated around the long table. A couple avoided eye contact. One cleared his throat nervously. Before Harrison could speak, a board member with salt and pepper hair shook his head. We've received serious allegations that you've been funneling money into secret accounts. Gavin Reynolds claims he can produce the documents to prove it. This could ruin not just you, but the entire championship. Michael placed a stack of papers on the table. We have data here suggesting that the real money trail leads to Gavin. He's framing Harrison to divert attention from his own involvement. Another board member spoke up, adjusting her glasses. And how do we know your evidence is legitimate? We're hearing conflicting stories. Harrison set his jaw. I've been sponsor to many events without a single whiff of scandal. Doesn't that count for anything? Gavin's come out of nowhere with these accusations. Why would I sabotage the very tournament I'm investing in? Silence fell, thick with uncertainty. Then Sheila, standing near the door, cleared her throat. We need a thorough investigation, but the public can't hear about it yet or we'll face a PR catastrophe. We're considering asking you to withdraw from the sponsorship to save face until this is resolved. Harrison felt a spike of outrage. So you're willing to let Gavin ruin my name on a rumor just to protect your own image? The older board member sighed, looking weary. If it comes down to it, yes. This championship is bigger than any one person. We don't have the luxury of waiting while the scandal blows up in the press. Michael's phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen, eyes widening. We just got a text from a caddy we've been looking for. He claims he's got proof Gavin orchestrated the match fixing. He wants to meet you, Harrison, privately. At that, a flicker of hope lit in Harrison's eyes. Finally, that's exactly what we need to clear this up. He stood, tugging at his cuffs. Board members, if you'll excuse me, I have a lead to follow. Once I have the evidence, you'll see who's telling the truth. They left the room, ignoring the board's anxious muttering. Outside, the corridor was busy with staff rushing about. Harrison spotted Jasmine near the physiotherapy station, flipping through paperwork with a frown. He signaled for her to step aside. She approached, her eyes swirling with concern. How did the meeting go? He gave her a reassuring nod. Not great, but we have a lead. A caddy who might confirm Gavin's guilt is willing to talk. This could turn everything around. Jasmine exhaled, relief mixing with caution. Then go talk to him. The sooner the better. Harrison gently touched her elbow. And you? The kids? They're okay for now, she said. My mother's keeping them close to home. But every day the press hounds me about the rumors. The more I fear they'll dig deeper and find out the truth, on their own terms. He understood. If we expose Gavin soon, maybe we'll kill two birds with one stone. We clear my name, and we knock out his leverage over you and the kids. He glanced at Michael, who was scanning his phone intently. Where's the caddy waiting? Michael looked up. He sent an address near the old parking lot behind the driving range. Says he'll be there after sunset, away from the cameras. Harrison squared his shoulders. I'll go. That caddy might be our only shot to prove we're not behind this. Michael nodded. Then let's plan it carefully. We should keep this meeting under wraps in case Gavin tries to intercept. If the caddy's telling the truth, we have to protect him too. Jasmine rested a hand on Harrison's shoulder. Please be careful. If Gavin or his people find out you're meeting someone with evidence, they won't just stand by. Their eyes locked for a beat. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to end this, Harrison said quietly. For you, for our children, for everything that matters. He and Michael left the clubhouse and headed to a discreet corner of the property to coordinate the meeting. The plan was to go near dusk, when the crowd thinned and the press were less likely to follow. Harrison tried to steel himself, ignoring the persistent swirl of headlines painting him as a fraud. Michael placed a call, verifying the caddy's presence. He sounds terrified, Michael murmured after he hung up. He said he has documents, maybe recordings, but he insisted you come alone. Harrison felt the weight of that responsibility. If he could secure the evidence, he might finally stop Gavin's smear campaign. He turned to Michael. Let's do it. I'll meet him at 8. Michael clasped his arm. This is our best shot. They shook on it, a hint of resolve passing between them. It was almost as if they could see the finish line, beckoning just out of reach. But as Harrison paced the small office, gathering his thoughts and preparing to leave for the rendezvous, Michael burst in, face pale and breath coming in rapid gasps. Harrison, the caddy's gone. Nobody knows where he is. His locker's cleared out. Harrison stared at the empty locker in disbelief. The metal door hung ajar, all personal items gone, no sign that the caddy who'd promised damning evidence had ever been there. Michael stood next to him, running a hand through his hair in frustration. The smell of old shoe leather and disinfectant hung heavy in the small room, made lonelier by its silence. The disarray told a story. A single empty shelf, a few scratches as if something had been hastily ripped away. Outside, the evening light slanted through a narrow window, dust motes dancing in its beam. "Are you sure this was his locker?" Harrison asked, even though he knew the answer. Michael nodded. "That's what the staff said. He never came in today. Nobody's seen him since he texted me last night." Harrison felt a hollow ache in his chest. The caddy had been their best hope of proving Gavin's wrongdoing. Without that testimony, it was Harrison's word against Gavin's carefully crafted accusations. "We need to find him," he said, clenching his fists at his sides. "He's either scared out of his mind or someone made sure he can't talk." Michael exhaled slowly. "Let's check the hospitals," he suggested, "or the precinct. Maybe he got himself into trouble." They set to work, dividing the task of calling around. For half an hour, Michael and Harrison stood in the narrow hallway outside the locker room, phones glued to their ears. They talked to bored-sounding receptionists at emergency rooms, night nurses who flipped through patient admission logs, front desk clerks at various small clinics in the city. Every response was the same: no new patients matching the caddy's name or description. Across the property, Jasmine was pacing near the physiotherapy tent, phone in hand, also making calls on the caddy's behalf. She'd managed to trace a mutual acquaintance who said the caddy had been receiving anonymous threats for days, calls and messages warning him to keep quiet. When she ended the call, her stomach twisted with worry. Returning to the clubhouse, Jasmine found Harrison outside one of the private lounges, face grim. Next to him stood a tall, lean golfer who wore the expression of someone trying to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. Harrison recognized him as one of the championship's rising stars, known for his straightforward style both on and off the green. "Look," the golfer was saying, "I don't like rumors, but I saw the caddy talking to Gavin a few days ago. It didn't look friendly. The caddy was agitated, like he wanted to get away, and Gavin was leaning in, real insistent." Harrison's eyes flared with anger. "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" The golfer shrugged helplessly. "Gavin's the last person most of us want to cross. There are whispers he's got a lot of money and influence behind him." He sighed. "I feel bad for that caddy now. Guy probably didn't stand a chance if he got on Gavin's bad side." Harrison thanked him for coming forward. The golfer gave Jasmine a small nod, sympathy in his eyes, then slipped away. "Gavin's stepping up his intimidation," Harrison muttered. "If the caddy was about to expose him, that means he's dangerous enough to make people vanish." Jasmine swallowed hard, recalling the photos she'd received of her children, the implied threats. "Let's keep digging. He can't hide every trace." Night fell, blanketing the country club in darkness. Harrison, Michael, and Jasmine set out across the course with flashlights in hand, checking every quiet corner where a scared caddy might hide. The air was cool and carried the faint smell of freshly mown grass. Overhead, the stars glimmered, oblivious to the mounting tension below. They crept around the driving range, shining beams of light on empty practice mats and scattered golf balls. The only noise was the soft crunch of their footsteps over the dew-covered turf, but there was no sign of the missing man, just an eerie sense of emptiness. Eventually, Michael managed to dig up the caddy's phone number. He dialed it, only to reach a dead line, a mechanical voice stating the number was no longer in service. Harrison felt a fresh wave of dread. It was as if the man had been erased from existence. Despite the late hour, the three headed back to the clubhouse to plead for help from the golf committee. In a large meeting room, under harsh fluorescent lights, Harrison explained the urgency of finding the missing caddy, but faces around the table remained guarded. A rotund committee member leaned forward. "This is all very concerning," he said, "but do you have any concrete proof tying Gavin to the caddy's disappearance?" Harrison's frustration bubbled up. "No, not yet. But we know the caddy had information about the rigging, and that's reason enough for Gavin to silence him." The committee members shared uneasy glances. One cleared her throat. "Without evidence, we can't just point fingers. We're sorry, Mr. Montgomery, but we have to remain neutral. This scandal is bad enough already." As they left the meeting, Michael tried to soothe Harrison's anger. "They're scared. This could crush the entire tournament if the truth goes public." Harrison's response came through gritted teeth. Better that than letting innocent people vanish because of a cover-up. Back in the hallway, Jasmine's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, hope flickering for a second that it might be the caddy. But it wasn't him. It was a friend from the physiotherapy department whispering about more suspicious behavior she'd witnessed. A man in a suit lurking around, asking pointed questions about Harrison's private life, specifically about the rumored children. Jasmine thanked her quietly, dread pooling in her stomach. Meanwhile, Michael had stepped aside to check the caddy's social media. He scrolled through old posts, photos of golf tournaments, selfies with famous players, snapshots of nights out. But the latest entries hinted at threats, cryptic remarks about not wanting to keep secrets anymore, and a final post that read, "If something happens to me, ask questions." "There," Michael said, showing Harrison the screen. He was clearly afraid. Harrison let out a long breath. "That must be why he reached out to us in the first place. Now we need to figure out where he's gone or who's taken him." An urgent text arrived just then from a staff member near the 17th hole. "Something weird on the ground. Think you should see this." Harrison and Michael exchanged a look and dashed off, Jasmine following close behind. They reached the quiet edge of the course, flashlights in hand. The staff member waited by a cluster of trees, pointing to footprints leading away from the green. At their feet lay a scrap of paper, torn at the edges. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, "I'm sorry." Harrison bent down, picking it up with trembling fingers. The paper was damp with night dew. "He must have left this," he said softly. "Maybe he was forced to." Jasmine swept her flashlight over the footprints, a trail that disappeared near a paved path. "He's in trouble. He probably couldn't reach us before someone got to him." They retraced the footprints as far as they could until they vanished near a fence. Beyond was a patch of scrubby ground leading to a dark road. No sign of the caddy, only a suffocating sense of dread left behind. All the while they had to be mindful of Gavin, who had chosen that same evening to stage a small press conference by the clubhouse. Cameras flashed in the distance, capturing him as he delivered his prepared remarks. Though Harrison couldn't hear every word, he caught enough of Gavin's calm, authoritative tone to guess he was reinforcing the narrative that Harrison was the true mastermind behind the scandal. Harrison set his jaw, silently pledging to prove otherwise. But the sense of time running out weighed heavily on him. If the caddy didn't reappear soon, Gavin might close the trap for good. Later, in a quieter moment, Jasmine pulled Harrison aside behind the clubhouse. The night was almost over, the sky beginning to lighten with the earliest hints of dawn. She looked exhausted, dark smudges under her eyes. "This is getting worse," she murmured. "What if the caddy never shows up? What if Gavin does something drastic before we can stop him?" Harrison wrapped an arm around her shoulders, the gesture both protective and reassuring. "He can't hide everything forever," he said, though even as the words came out, he questioned their certainty. "We'll keep searching, and we'll protect your children in the meantime." Jasmine leaned into him for just a moment, grateful for the solidity of his presence. "I refuse to run away," she said, voice trembling with resolve. "No matter how bad it gets. If you go down, we all go down together. But I won't let Gavin use my sons as a bargaining chip." Harrison took out his phone to check for missed messages, any sign from the caddy that might have slipped through. Nothing. He tried the caddy's number again, only to hear the same lifeless automated message. The emptiness of the line felt like a punch to the gut. After hours of fruitless searching, they returned to the small office that Harrison had been using at the club. The windows looked out on the faint glow of sunrise over the course. Jasmine sank into a chair, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Michael leaned against a filing cabinet, scowling at his phone's dark screen. Suddenly, Harrison's phone buzzed, startling them all. He snatched it up, heart pounding, hoping it wasn't just another reporter or board member. The screen displayed an unknown number. He pressed accept, and a shaky whisper filled the room. "I have the proof. Meet me tonight. Pier by the lake. They're after me." Harrison slipped his phone back into his pocket, exchanging a tense look with Michael and Jasmine. The caddy's shaky voice still echoed in his mind, replaying that whispered plea. "They're after me. Meet me tonight. Pier by the lake." They had only a few hours before nightfall, just enough time to form a plan. The three of them reconvened in the small office that had become their makeshift command center at the club. A single desk lamp cast long shadows on the walls, highlighting the strain on everyone's face. "This might be our last chance," Harrison said, leaning forward, hands braced on the desk. "The caddy has the proof we need. If we can get it before Gavin does, maybe we can put an end to this." Michael nodded, flicking through his phone. "I'll stay in contact with the caddy, make sure he doesn't vanish again. But if he's scared enough to hide all day, who knows how this will go down." Jasmine stood near the window, arms crossed. She watched the sun sink behind the towering trees lining the fairway, tension knotting in her stomach. "We have to protect him. Gavin's people could be following him, waiting to pounce as soon as he tries to hand over the evidence." Harrison's gaze fell to the faint reflection of Jasmine's face in the glass. He could see the worry in her eyes and felt a surge of protectiveness. "Then we'll be there first," he said. "Or at least, we'll try." As night cloaked the golf course, they slipped out of the clubhouse. The final day of the tournament was fast approaching, but the usual press and paparazzi swarmed only near the entrance. No one noticed Harrison, Michael, and Jasmine heading in the opposite direction toward a discreet spot in the parking lot where Harrison's car awaited. They drove in uneasy silence, the road illuminated only by streetlights that glowed in sparse intervals. Michael tapped at his phone to send brief updates, hoping to keep the caddy calm. Meanwhile, Jasmine occasionally glanced at the rearview mirror, worried they might be followed. She couldn't shake the images of threatening notes and suspicious strangers asking about her children. After 20 minutes, they reached a secluded stretch of road leading to the lake. The pier jutted into dark water, reflecting the moon's pale light. A scattering of tall reeds rustled in the breeze, and the occasional chirp of night insects broke the stillness. They parked some distance away and approached on foot, flashlights off to avoid drawing attention. The faint outline of a person stood at the far end of the pier, silhouetted against the water. As they drew closer, Harrison recognized the caddy's figure, tense, shoulders hunched. When the caddy saw them, he raised a trembling hand in greeting. "Thank God," he whispered, voice raw with fear. "I've been hiding all day. They nearly found me twice." Harrison stepped forward, speaking gently. "You did the right thing calling us. We'll help you. Just tell us what you have." The caddy set a weather-beaten folder on the wooden railing. "Documents," he said. "Emails, bank statements, recordings. It's all in here. Everything that ties Gavin to the rigging. He paid off some big names and there's mention of a powerful backer, though I don't know who exactly. But if you show this to the tournament board, no one can deny his guilt." Jasmine exhaled, relief mingling with worry. "We need to get you out of here safely. Gavin must know you're passing this along." The caddy nodded, eyes darting about. "I heard he was looking for me. He's got people." Footsteps rumbled from behind them on the pier. In the moonlit darkness, Harrison made out several shadows approaching. He clenched his fists, heart pounding. Gavin strode at the head of the group, his expression calm but predatory. A half-dozen men flanked him, their stances implying they were more than just hired bodyguards. "You really think you can pull this off?" Gavin asked, voice carrying easily over the water's hush. He eyed the folder near the caddy's hand. How touching. A secret little meeting in the dead of night. Harrison moved protectively in front of the caddy. feeling the old wooden boards creak beneath his feet. "Stay back," he warned. "We have evidence now. Whatever you're planning, it won't work." Gavin's gaze flicked toward the folder. His lips twisted in a cold smile. "You mean that pile of papers the caddy thinks he can use against me? I wouldn't be so sure you'll leave here with it." Before anyone could respond, one of the men with Gavin lunged. Harrison and Michael fought him off, grappling on the pier's edge. The caddy scrambled to protect the folder, knees knocking as fear threatened to paralyze him. Jasmine snatched the folder from his hands, clutching it tight. "Go!" Harrison shouted at Jasmine. He wrestled with the attacker, who swung a wild punch that nearly sent them both crashing into the lake. Michael jumped in, landing a blow that made the man stagger. Jasmine sprinted toward the shore, folder pressed to her chest. Another of Gavin's men tried to block her path, but she dodged his reach, the folder crinkling in her arms. As she neared the pier's entrance, she saw a faint light bobbing near the trees. Michael had managed to contact someone. Suddenly, a figure tackled her from the side, knocking the breath from her lungs. She hit the wooden deck, stunned. The folder slid across the boards, dangerously close to the water's edge. Gavin's eyes gleamed with triumph as he took a step toward it. Harrison, seeing Jasmine under attack, broke free from his scuffle and rushed over. He flung himself at the assailant, pinning her down, delivering a fierce shove. As the man stumbled, Harrison helped Jasmine to her feet. Together they lunged for the folder. In that heated second, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Footsteps pounded on the pier's planks. "Harrison!" a familiar voice called. It was Michael, filming the confrontation on his phone. His camera caught Gavin's expression twisting with fury. Gavin snarled, lunging toward Harrison and Jasmine. The caddy, trembling but determined, scooped up the folder and pressed it into Harrison's arms. "Do it!" he rasped. "Show the world!" By now, the men with Gavin were backing away, realizing they were on camera. Gavin himself stood rigid, jaw clenched, eyes darting to see if he could grab the evidence. Finding no opening, he turned to glare at Harrison. "You don't know what you're getting into," he hissed. "You expose me. You bring down more people than you ever imagined. Powerful people." Harrison held tight to the folder, heart racing. "I'm done letting you blackmail me or threaten Jasmine or terrorize the caddy. It's over, Gavin." Gavin's response was a guttural sound of anger. He made one last desperate attempt to snatch the documents. Harrison blocked him with his arm, and Michael captured every moment on video. The caddy, still shaking, muttered, "We have to get out of here." Suddenly, the wail of approaching sirens shattered the night's tension. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees as police cars sped down the deserted road toward the pier. Gavin's men glanced at one another in alarm. Gavin glowered at Harrison, chest heaving. The officers quickly surrounded the pier, flashlights and commands flying. "Stay where you are!" Gavin saw the net closing in around him. In a burst of desperation, he shoved two cops aside, trying to bolt. More officers closed in, and in the confusion, he managed to slip out of one officer's grip. His shirt ripped as they tried to grab him again. "Let go of me!" Gavin roared, voice carrying over the sirens. "If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me." For a moment it seemed he might escape, but an officer tackled him to the ground. The others took control, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Gavin thrashed and shouted, face twisted with rage. "Do you hear me, Montgomery?" he yelled. "I'll drag you all to hell if you cross me." Harrison, clutching the caddy's folder, stepped back. He could feel Jasmine shivering beside him, both from the cold night air and from the pent-up fear. The caddy sank onto a nearby bench, relief flooding his features. Michael lowered his phone, having recorded every incriminating word Gavin uttered. Still pinned by officers, Gavin continued to spit threats. Just then, a detective arrived, quickly assessing the scene. He motioned for another officer to escort Gavin away. As they dragged him toward a squad car, Gavin twisted his head around to shoot one last venomous glare at Harrison and Jasmine. "You have no idea how far this goes!" The sirens continued to wail in the background, their urgent cries echoing off the water. Harrison helped Jasmine stand more steadily, sliding an arm around her for warmth and reassurance. He glanced at Michael, who gave him a quick nod, relief evident on his face. The caddy looked on, torn between fear and hope, finally understanding that maybe, just maybe, he was safe. Sirens wail in the distance. Gavin, desperate, breaks free, shouting that even if he goes down, he'll take everyone with him. Harrison and Jasmine exchanged tense looks. This fight isn't over. Harrison paced in a small meeting room at Riverdale Country Club, the early morning sun filtering through the blinds. Though the piercing sirens from the night before had faded into memory, the sense of urgency lingered. He clutched the caddy's folder against his side, its pages full of the evidence that would finally prove who had been orchestrating the tournament's fraud. This was the big day, the final round of the championship, and also the day he would clear his name, or risk losing everything. He glanced at his phone to see multiple missed calls. Reporters were bombarding him for comment, spectators were flowing onto the course, and the board members he had once tried to win over were now teetering between supporting him or throwing him under the bus. He had to act decisively. Michael walked in, shaking raindrops off his jacket. "Weather's turning, but the championship will go on," he said, trying to sound casual. The corners of his eyes gave away his worry. "The final press briefing is scheduled for noon. The question is, are we showing them what's in that folder?" Harrison didn't hesitate. "Yes, everything. Gavin's behind bars, but he still threatened to take everyone down with him. I won't let him twist the narrative." Michael nodded. "I've already shared copies with the authorities. But we need to go public if you want to clear your name in the court of public opinion." At the thought of standing in front of cameras, heart pounding, Harrison felt a flicker of anxiety. But he remembered Jasmine's words. Hiding would only give Gavin or whoever was backing him more power. He left the meeting room and stepped out into the corridor, where staff scurried about, preparing for the final day of play. Sporadic applause erupted from the course outside as early golfers sank putts on the practice green. The polished floors glinted under bright lights, as if the entire building waited for a showdown. Making his way to the physiotherapy area, he found Jasmine checking her phone with a concentrated frown. She looked up, relief and tension mingling in her eyes. "They just confirmed the final round will start soon," she said. "The board wants the show to go on, but after the fiasco at the pier last night, I'm sure the media will be circling like sharks." Harrison nodded. He gently touched her arm, noticing how fatigued she seemed. "We have the evidence," he reassured her. "The caddy's out of immediate danger, and the police will want to speak with him again today. I'll do whatever it takes to clear this up and keep you and the boys safe." She drew closer, lowering her voice. "I've arranged for them to stay far from the cameras. My mom's bringing them by later, only if the press is a little calmer." His heart caught at the mention of her mother and the 3 children he had yet to fully meet. He felt a swirl of excitement and apprehension. "I won't let Gavin or his people hurt them." A knock at the door frame made them both look up. Sheila, the tournament director, stood there looking more weary than usual. "Harrison," she said, "the board wants to speak with you, now." Jasmine offered a reassuring squeeze on his shoulder. "Go," she murmured. When Harrison arrived, several board members were already seated around a gleaming conference table. Raindrops spattered the windows, creating a muted background. A hush fell over the room. The tension was palpable. "We understand you've come into possession of documents relating to the alleged fraud," said one member, carefully neutral. Harrison placed the battered folder on the table. "Yes," he said, scanning the faces. "Emails, bank statements, recorded conversations, tying Gavin Reynolds to match-fixing, bribes, and blackmail. There are references to a higher authority as well." The oldest board member, a dignified man with silver hair, shifted uncomfortably. "I'd like to see that." Harrison slid the folder across. "You can see for yourselves." Sheila flipped through the pages, eyes widening. As she reached certain paragraphs, her face paled. "My God, He was funneling money from multiple sources, including a name here, C. Dubois? That's a major investor in the golf circuit. If that's real... A hush fell. The board members whispered among themselves, sending worried glances at each other. One woman at the far end let out a shaky breath. This is bigger than Gavin. He might have been their agent, but these documents suggest a network. The silver-haired man looked stricken. If we expose this, the entire championship's reputation is at stake. We'll be under scrutiny for months, maybe years. Harrison's voice rang with conviction. Better to face scrutiny and come out clean than continue a lie. You've seen how easily rumors spread. The truth is our only chance to restore integrity. He could sense the hesitation in the room. These were people who had built careers on protecting the prestige of this event. But at last, Sheila closed the folder. I believe him, she said quietly. And for what it's worth, I support a public disclosure. We can't hide from what Gavin has done, and who he was working for. A collective murmur of agreement spread around the table, some more reluctant than others. Harrison felt a knot unwind in his stomach. At least the board was no longer treating him like a scapegoat. He left the conference room with a renewed sense of purpose, heading directly to the main press area. Reporters milled about, clutching notepads and microphones, eyes shifting at every staff member who walked by. As soon as Harrison appeared, an excited buzz tore through them, cameras raised. Michael stood near the podium checking the microphone. Jasmine joined Harrison, stepping in from a side corridor. She rested a hand on his back. You're about to address the world, or at least a large chunk of it, she murmured. Are you ready? He glanced at her, recalling the sleepless nights, the threats, the guilt that he never knew he was a father to 3, but also the determination he felt ever since. Yes, he said, for all of us. Walking up to the podium, he cleared his throat, silencing the chatter. Dozens of faces stared back. The hush was tangible, electric. A flash of lightning outside lit the windows, followed by a distant rumble of thunder, a fitting backdrop for the storm he was about to unleash. Thank you for being here, he began, voice steady. He introduced himself, reminding everyone that he was the sponsor who had come to uphold the values of the game, only to find corruption festering beneath the surface. He spoke of how the rumors had tainted his name, painting him as the mastermind behind the rigging, claims he vehemently denied. Then he held up the caddy's folder, explaining the evidence within. This championship deserves honesty, Harrison said firmly, locking eyes with the crowd. We discovered that Gavin Reynolds arranged payoffs and manipulated match results, but he wasn't acting alone. A larger network of individuals used him as their front. They sought to destroy me when I got close to the truth. Some reporters took furious notes, others snapped pictures. A few asked sharp questions which Harrison answered, backing up his words with details from the folder. Finally, a braver journalist lifted a hand and asked about the personal rumors swirling around him. Harrison paused, meeting the person's gaze. His chest tightened, but he remembered how hiding only gave Gavin more ammunition. Yes, he said, there is a personal matter, one that has been used to threaten me. I recently discovered I have 3 children, triplets. They've been kept out of the public eye for their own safety. He felt Jasmine's presence off to the side, willing him strength. At first I was shocked, but now I understand this is a blessing I can't run from. A low murmur rippled through the press, cameras clicking more furiously. Harrison raised a hand for quiet. I intend to be the father they deserve, openly, without shame. This scandal won't change that. The tension in the room intensified, but it was different now. A sense of empathy seemed to stir among some of the journalists. The story they had come to chase was bigger and more complex than simple rumors. 1 hour later, the final round of the tournament resumed under a fragile calm. The sun emerged from behind stubborn clouds, and a crowd gathered around the 18th hole, wanting resolution not just to the match but to the chaos swirling around. Harrison watched from a VIP section along with Michael, his phone buzzing every few seconds with new messages. Jasmine appeared, holding out her phone. "They've arrested a top official, someone from the board of trustees," she whispered. "Apparently, the documents named him too. Police took him in for questioning." Harrison nodded, relief creeping in. The truth is unfolding. Let it keep coming. As the final putt sank, applause thundered across the course. The champion raised his arms in triumph, and the crowd roared. In that moment, Harrison felt a burst of hope for the sport he had come to believe in again. To his surprise, a commotion at the edge of the crowd signaled Jasmine's mother approaching, ushering 3 curious little boys forward. Their wide eyes darted from the cheering spectators to Harrison, who stood rooted in place. He saw them for the first time in the bright afternoon sun, identical faces framed by small, nervous smiles. Jasmine offered him a trembling smile of her own as he knelt down. Heart-pounding, he gave them a cautious grin, and they ventured closer. The hush of the crowd around them seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of cameras capturing this intensely personal moment. "They're a bit shy," Jasmine said gently, placing a hand on each of the boys' shoulders. "But they've been asking about you for a while now. Do you want to say hello?" Harrison's throat tightened. "Hey, guys," he murmured, keeping his voice soft. I'm your dad. It's nice to finally meet you." One boy stared at him intently, another fiddled with his shirt hem, and the third ventured a small, shy wave. Harrison's heart swelled, eyes misting. Slowly he held out an arm, letting them come closer if they wanted. With cautious curiosity, they approached. He scooped the nearest one up and settled him on his shoulders, a gesture he remembered from childhood days with his own father. The boy giggled, gripping Harrison's hair for balance. A hush fell over the cameras and onlookers, as if everyone realized they were witnessing something beyond the usual sensational headlines. Jasmine stood by, tears glistening but a smile on her face. Harrison, inhaling deeply, glanced at the camera flashes, unafraid. "I came here to save my name," he said, speaking loudly enough for the microphones. "But I leave with something far more precious: a family." The crowd erupted into cheers and flashes went off like fireworks. Michael, standing nearby, broke into a wide grin. Even Sheila and some of the board members appeared, relief mingling with cautious optimism on their faces. In that moment, Harrison felt the weight of the last few days lift from his shoulders. He had confronted the corruption, protected the caddy, exposed Gavin, and most importantly, taken a step forward with the children he never knew he had. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, questions, and plenty of public scrutiny. But as the applause swelled around him, he realized he didn't face it alone. He ruffled the little boy's hair gently, feeling tiny hands gripping his shoulder. The world still watched, but for the first time, Harrison felt certain of his direction. He lifts one of the triplets onto his shoulders and addresses the media. "I came here to save my name, but I leave with something far more precious: a family." The crowd cheers, cameras flash, and a promising new chapter begins for everyone. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.